course, they never learned, so they came back again. Ponce de Leon, we told, he went to look for the fountain of youth. They ended his search 6 days after he arrived in Cuba. He died from the wounds that the Calusas had put upon him. What that did for the Calusas, they learned instantly the logistics of making special arrows that could neutralize the power of horses. They made special bows and arrows with special trajectories and force, and they would put their archers in the trees, and they could shoot an arrow right through the body of a horse. So when you read about how the Indians, the Indians in quote, were terrified of horses, the Calusas dealt with the horses. And then with armor, after killing the Ponce de Leon fellows in armor, they took the armor, they stuffed it with straw, they hung it up on a tree, and they found every weak spot through which their spears and arrows could go. So when the Spaniards came back, they were ready for them. Yeah. They could take care of the armor, they could take care of the horses, and they were more brilliant tacticians in their own land. They could lure. So Alion goes next. And again, he went to a different part of the northern Florida coast. And when he was there, these Appalachians welcomed him, gave them food and drink. And then Alion invited about 300 of the Native Americans on the ships. And when they came aboard, they simply battened down the hatches and started taking them away as slaves. And every single one of them committed suicide before they got to Cuba, rather than face enslavement and this terrible act of treachery. And then Alion made the mistake of going back again. And this time they were ready for him. Once again they feted, wine and dine. And they said to him, Alion, why are you fighting for this distant monarch across the sea? We are warriors, and we would have more respect for you if you came looking out for yourself and your people here. We could share some things with you and show you some techniques of surviving here. Anyway, when the Calusas were finished with Alion, he and about 3 others managed to get back to Puerto Rico. For 100 years, the Native Americans in Florida kept the European settlers at bay. You hear about Herman de Soto, how de Soto discovered the Mississippi. De Soto was utterly and totally defeated by those Native Americans. I'm telling you this because the tradition of resistance filtered into the blacks who were coming in now into Florida and who were going to write one of the great epic chapters of a struggle in the Columbian era. And you are told in the history books about 2 Seminole wars. The first, the blacks were called Seminoles. Then when the Creek Nation broke up and Sacagawea took his group over the border into Florida, these Creeks were called Seminoles. So there's no cohesive or logical Seminole. It was a word used to describe the people who had come into Florida from the north. And that alliance of the Native Americans and the Africans in Florida held in spite of every effort to break it. You heard about Osceola. Many black people call their children Osceola. Osceola married a black woman, and when he went to have talks with Thompson, General Thompson, at the Fort Gaines, slave catchers captured his wife. And his wife in the Seminole language was called Cochicher, which means morning dew. And this sister was a fighter, because the slave catcher who took her, the news came out after that she killed him and committed suicide. But Osceola swore that he would avenge this black woman's capture. And Thompson, the general, he and his men followed him for 2 years. And one night after Thompson had a good dinner and was coming out of his veranda, they filled him with about 14 shots from their rifles. And Osceola, after he fell, shouted, you know, "I remember the hour," he said. So we have to remember ours too, you see. No black woman was ever defended in a war in this hemisphere until Osceola fought. He fought, the first Seminole War was fought over that capture of Cochicher. And amongst these groups, you know, you know how we get the research about the Seminole Wars? You have to go to New England, into the libraries, and into the parish records. And there are letters from white soldiers who were fighting in Florida, who wrote home about what was happening. Because it was a felony for any journalist to mention that blacks were fighting in Florida. That's why you don't know about it. And that fight went on. And amongst the great leaders who emerged was Abraham. He is one of the great black leaders in this North American history. All of the whites who write about Abraham, even though they hate him, write about him with respect. Abraham was a brilliant man, a brilliant fighter, a brilliant tactician. He knew several languages, and he was one of the chief negotiators. See, while the Spanish owned Florida, Abraham knew that they could stay free. But when the United States bought Florida in 1819, they knew now that the whole might of the United States was going to be turned against them.